Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're opening up a really fascinating stack of material.
Yeah, and it all centers around this powerful idea. It's simple, really, but
Yeah.
potent. You are always choosing.
Exactly. We're drawing heavily from a chapter in The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Feck, which,
Yeah.
it really looks head on at how we deal with problems, circumstances.
It's responsibility,
Yeah.
fundamentally, how we relate to it.
Mm-hmm. So our mission in this deep dive is to unpack these ideas, the ones presented in the source material, really get to their core.
And see what kind of practical insights emerge, for how we navigate our lives, especially when things get difficult.
Okay, so the source kicks things off with this really striking analogy, doesn't it? To illustrate choice versus force.
It does, the marathon. 26.2 miles.
Right. First, picture this.
Yeah.
You're forced to run it. Gunpoint. Finish or else.
Awful. Just terrifying, painful, miserable. You can almost feel it.
Totally. Now, same distance, 26.2 miles,
Yeah.
same you running it, but you chose it.
Uh-huh. You train for months. Maybe you're running for a cause. Friends are cheering.
And you cross that line, exhausted, yeah, but maybe it's one of the proudest moments of your life.
It's the same physical pain, same person, same road. The source points out the only difference.
Is that sense that you chose it? You're responsible for being there?
Exactly. When we feel like we're choosing our struggles, we feel empowered.
But when they feel forced on us, we feel like victims, miserable.
That choice, that sense of responsibility, it transforms the experience. That's the core idea here.
And speaking of transformation through choice, the source brings up the story of William James. It's pretty incredible.
Oh, absolutely. The father of American psychology.
Yeah.
But his early life, as the source lays it out, sounds just brutal.
Yeah, born wealthy, sure, but plagued by serious health issues from childhood. Eye problems, stomach issues, hearing loss, these awful back spasms.
Kept him isolated, apparently.
Yeah.
And he didn't fit in at school. Struggled. Tried painting.
But wasn't great at it, or at least his father didn't think so. Compared him unfavorably to his siblings, like Henry James, the novelist.
Yeah, that must have been tough. Then Harvard Medical School. Felt like a fake, the source says. Insecure, still sick.
Dropped out. Another disappointment.
And then that Amazon trip. Disaster. Smallpox, abandoned, crippling back pain. Barely made it home.
So you get to, what, his late 20s?
Yeah.
Approaching 30?
Yeah. And he's unemployed, feels like he's failed at everything, still has chronic health issues, deeply depressed.
Even thinking about suicide, according to the source.
Right. But then comes this pivot. Reading philosophy one night, he decides on this little experiment.
Okay, what was it?
For 1 year.
Yeah.
Just 1 year. He'd choose to believe he was 100% responsible for everything in his life, no matter the circumstance.
Wow. Responsible for all of it, even the stuff that wasn't his fault.
That was the experiment. And for that year, he'd do everything in his power to change his circumstances. If nothing improved after a year, well, then he'd know.
And the punchline.
William James becomes this hugely influential figure. Father of American psychology, Harvard professor, writer, family man, lived for decades more. He called it his rebirth.
So the realization the source pulls from this is pretty stark.
Yeah. We individually are responsible for everything in our lives, no matter the external circumstances.
Now, that doesn't mean we cause everything, right? Like, you don't cause a drunk driver to hit you.
No, absolutely not.
Yeah.
But you always control how you interpret it and how you respond. That part's always on you.
You're always responsible for your experience. Even doing nothing, not choosing a response, that's still a choice, still an interpretation.
You're always picking the values, the metrics. Always.
Okay, but this is where things get a bit tricky, isn't it? The source calls it the responsibility fault fallacy. People mix them up.
They really do. The source mentions that famous line, with great power comes great responsibility. From Spider-Man, actually, though the author apparently misattributed it first, which is kind of funny.
Yeah. It's a classic line. But the source flips it, which I found really interesting.
With great responsibility comes great power.
Yeah. It suggests taking responsibility is actually where the power comes from. It's the starting point for change.
But people hear responsible and think it means at fault. The source works hard to separate those.
Right. Like if you hit someone with your car.
Okay, clear case. You're at fault and you're responsible. Your actions caused it, you deal with the consequences. Straightforward.
But what about finding a baby on your doorstep?
Totally different. You are absolutely not at fault for that baby being there. Didn't cause it.
That's immediately your responsibility, isn't it? You have to choose what to do next, and you're responsible for whatever problems come from that choice.
Exactly. Or a judge on a case.
Yeah.
Not their fault. Crime happened.
But they're responsible for handling it, applying the law, choosing consequences, using their metrics.
So the distinction boils down to tense, really. Fault is past tense who caused it through past choices.
Responsibility is present tense. What choices are you making right now in this moment about this situation, regardless of who caused it?
And the source is pretty direct here. Nobody else is ever responsible for your situation but you. Others might be to blame for your unhappiness.
But you're the one responsible for how you see it, react to it, value it. You choose the metric. Always you. That's still a tough pill to swallow sometimes, especially when you think about applying it to really painful stuff. Tragedies.
Yeah, and the source goes there. It gets quite personal, actually. The author talks about being dumped, like really badly,
Yeah?
cheated on, left for someone else.
Ouch. Yeah, that's rough. And his first reaction.
Misery. Months of it, apparently. Blaming her, trying to control things, which, just made it worse. Predictably.
But then there was a shift.
A realization. Yeah, she was to blame for her actions, absolutely. But he was responsible for the problem of his own unhappiness now. He had to make himself happy again. She wasn't going to fix it.
So taking ownership of his response.
Exactly. And that's when things started to change. He focused on himself, exercise, friends, meeting people, travel, volunteering, choosing values around self-care. Slowly, things got better.
And later he saw his own part in it too.
Yeah, with time and distance. He realized he hadn't been a great boyfriend. Maybe cold, arrogant, took her for granted, ignored some red flags about her character.
Well, the source is clear, right? This doesn't excuse what she did.
Not at all. But seeing his own fault within that framework of taking responsibility for his part in his reaction was key. It meant he wasn't just a victim.
And it helped him learn, presumably, for future relationships.
Massively. That painful experience led to real growth because he took responsibility for his side of it, his mistakes, his healing. Responsibility, the source argues, isn't just for good times. It's how we grow from the bad times.
So this applies even if something is 100% not your fault, like getting robbed.
Right. Not your fault you were robbed, but you're responsible for how you react. Do you panic, fight? How do you cope afterwards? Those are your choices, your responsibility.
The source also brings up Malala Yousafzai, shot by the Taliban at 14. Clearly, horrifically, not her fault.
Absolutely not. But the source highlights her choices. When asked who she was, she chose to identify herself.
And after the attack, she chose to keep speaking out, became this global voice, Nobel laureate.
The source presents it as this profound example of taking responsibility for her response to tragedy, turning it into something powerful.
There's also that anecdote about the author and a grieving father.
Yeah. The father criticized him, angry about applying responsibility to losing a child, and the author's response, as described,
was to apply his own advice. Choose the better problem, patience, empathy, instead of getting defensive, taking responsibility for his reaction in that difficult moment.
And this whole idea, it stretches even further, doesn't it, to things you're just born with, or things that happened to you early on.
Yeah, disadvantages you didn't choose, genetics like OCD or maybe physical traits, a really difficult childhood, abuse, things that are definitively not your fault.
Right. The source uses examples of teens with severe OCD, Imogen's tapping, Josh's equalizing things, Jack germophobia.
And it acknowledges this stuff is neurological, genetic. It's not their fault they have it.
But the therapy described, it's not about finding blame or even necessarily a cure in the traditional sense. It's about helping them manage their values.
How does that work?
Well, first, accepting the condition is there. It's an imperfection, not their fault. Then recognizing the OCD's values, the need for perfect order, say, are irrational, not their true values.
So separating themselves from the disorder's demands.
Exactly. And then the crucial step, consciously choosing new values, things they actually want, like a social life, independence, just feeling okay.
But that involves facing the fear head on. Right. The desensitization stuff sounds intense.
Oh, yeah. Deliberately doing things that trigger the panic. Sitting with mess, touching dirty things. The source mentions tears, discomfort. It's really hard work living out those new values when the old ones are screaming at you.
But it helps them make progress. There's that quote from Jack.
Yeah, the one with germophobia, he said something like, I didn't choose this life. I didn't choose this horrible, horrible condition, but I get to choose how to live with it. I have to choose how to live with it. Powerful.
It really is. The source uses a poker analogy, too, which kind of clicks.
Right. Life deals you cards. Some people get amazing hands, others get terrible ones. That's not your fault. Just the deal.
But the game isn't just the cards you're dealt.
No. It's how you play the hand you've got. That's your responsibility. And playing a tough hand well, the source suggests that's actually more meaningful, more important than getting dealt an easy win.
So even with really hard backgrounds, abuse, trauma, stuff that wasn't your fault, the path forward, according to this perspective, always involves accepting responsibility for your current choices, how you move forward from here.
Okay, so then the source kind of shifts gears a bit, looking at how this responsibility fault thing plays out socially. It introduces this term, victimhood chic.
Yeah, victimhood chic. And according to the source, this is something seen pretty publicly, especially online.
Where people, it suggests, use that confusion between fault and responsibility to basically avoid responsibility by blaming others, often for things the source calls perceived tiny infractions.
Right. It describes this phenomenon across different groups, where claiming victim status, even over small things, seems to get attention, sympathy.
And maybe a feeling of being morally right, yeah.
And the source points a finger at the media environment, too, calling it outrage porn.
Suggesting it fuels this cycle, amplifying minor conflicts for clicks and profit, generating outrage.
Which then distracts from bigger, actual problems and makes things more polarized. That's the argument presented.
The critique in the source is basically that this victimhood chic, as it's termed, takes focus away from people who are actually victims of serious harm.
And that maybe constantly feeling offended gives people some kind of rush, almost.
That's the idea put forward.
Yeah.
The source's viewpoint is essentially that living in a free society means you will encounter things you don't like. Part of the deal.
And navigating that responsibly is key, so it offers some suggestions.
Like picking your battles, trying empathy, being skeptical of outrage-bait media.
And choosing better values like honesty, transparency, doubt, over just wanting to be right or feel good or get revenge.
And upholding those values, the source argues, requires taking responsibility. Again, just to be clear, we're outlining the perspective and analysis presented in the source material here.
Okay. Wow. We've covered a ton. And listening to all this, you might be thinking, okay, I get the idea, responsibility, choice, fine. But how? How do I actually change what I care about? Change my values?
Yeah, the practical how-to. And the source's answer is, well, it's very direct, almost Yoda-like.
Which is?
Do or do not. There is no how.
Okay. Sounds a bit simplistic, maybe dismissive.
It can sound that way. But the argument behind it is, changing is simple because you're already doing it. You're always choosing what to give a damn about, what values guide you, what metrics matter.
So changing is just deciding to point that energy somewhere else, making a different choice.
Fundamentally, yes. It's presented as that straightforward, a choice. But, and this is crucial, the source stresses this, while it's simple, it is absolutely not easy.
Because changing those core values, the things you measure yourself by, that comes with baggage.
Big time. Uncomfortable side effects. Like, uncertainty is a big one.
Yeah, if you ditch old values that gave you direction, you might feel lost, right? Not sure what's right or wrong anymore.
Exactly. And feeling like a failure. If you've measured yourself by metric A your whole life, and now you choose metric B.
You're probably going to fail by metric A's standards for a while. That can feel awful.
Definitely. And rejection, too. Relationships are often built on shared values. Change yours. And some of those connections might fray or even break.
So these feelings, the confusion, the failure, the loss, they're not signs you're messing up?
According to the source, no. They're normal. They're inevitable. They're actually necessary side effects of the difficult, uncomfortable, but ultimately empowering work of choosing different values and investing your energy differently.
We have covered a lot of ground in this deep dive, really starting with that marathon image, the huge difference between problems forced on us and problems we choose.
And that critical split the source draws between fault, what happened in the past, and responsibility, what you're choosing now.
Yeah, and seeing how taking that responsibility, even when things are painful, tragic, or completely unfair, that's where the source says strength and growth really come from.
We looked at how that applies to things you can't control, like genetics or past trauma, and also touched on the source's perspective on certain social dynamics around blame and victimhood.
The core thread, though, seems to be this constant reality. You are always choosing what you value, what metrics you use, how you respond.
And taking conscious responsibility for that choice, even when it's hard, even when it's uncomfortable, is presented as absolutely key.
So maybe here's something to think about after this deep dive. Take a look at a problem or a challenge you're facing right now
Just pause for a moment.
and ask yourself, what happens if you shift the lens? Just for a moment, move away from who's to blame or what caused it.
And focus instead on your responsibility.
Mm.
Your responsibility for how you're interpreting it, how you're reacting, and what choices you can make next.
How might looking at it that way change your perspective? Could it even maybe change the problem itself, something to mull over?